it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. I'm a vampire hunter for the Vatican. Here are my stories. By Brandreth McClure. Episode 1. Blood of the Faithful. A jagged bolt of lightning split the sky over Vatican City, illuminating the ancient spires in a brief, ghostly light before plunging them back into darkness. The storm had rolled in swiftly, carrying with it an unnatural chill that seeped into the very stones of the Holy See. Inside, the Vatican's corridors lay empty, save for the soft echoes of raindrops beating against the stained glass and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. In a small chamber deep within the Vatican's labyrinthine halls, Father Gabriel Valente knelt in silent prayer. His head bowed, he clasped an ancient rosary, the beads worn smooth by years of devotion. The candlelight flickered, casting shadows across the room, giving the impression that the walls themselves were alive, breathing with the tension that gripped the night. Gabriel's lips moved in a barely audible whisper, reciting the familiar Latin phrases that had become his solace, his armor. Yet despite the peace these words usually brought, there was an unmistakable weight in his heart tonight, a foreboding he could not shake. The storm outside seemed to mirror the tempest within him, a storm that had raged for as long as he could remember. As thunder boomed overhead, Gabriel's mind drifted to the past, to a night not unlike this one, when his life had been irrevocably changed. In his mind's eye, he saw the twisted, gnarled trees of his childhood home, the moon hidden behind thick clouds as darkness descended upon his family. He remembered the fear, the helplessness, as the creatures had come, eyes glowing red, fangs bared, ripping through his home and his loved ones with merciless hunger. The screams of his parents and sister echoed in his memory, a haunting chorus that had on occasions driven him to the edge of madness, only to be pulled back by the strong hands of a Vatican priest who had arrived too late to save them, but just in time to save him. Gabriel had been a mere boy, but from that moment on his path had been set. The Vatican had taken him in, raising him within the secretive order of Sanctus Sanguis, a sect few knew existed, even within the church itself. His life since had been one of rigorous training and uncompromising discipline. He learned the ancient rites of exorcism, the art of combat, and the knowledge of the supernatural creatures that stalked the earth. He'd been forged into a one-man weapon, a hunter of the night, sworn to protect the innocent and bring God's judgment upon all the damned. The faces of the many vampires he'd slain blurred together in his memory, but the face of the one who had taken his family remained clear, burned into his mind with the fire of vengeance. Every mission, every kill, brought him a step closer to avenging their deaths, but also deeper into the darkness that he fought so strongly against. It was a darkness that whispered to him in his dreams, that taunted him with the lure of power, and that he resisted with every fiber of his being. As the storm raged on, Gabriel rose to his knees, his prayer concluded. The room felt smaller, as if the walls were closing in around him. He took a deep breath and crossed himself, feeling the cool metal of the crucifix against his chest. The scent of incense lingered in the air, mingling with the faintest hint of sulfur, a scent that always seemed to accompany his thoughts of the past. Leaving his chamber, Gabriel moved through the shaded corridors of the Vatican, his footsteps echoing in the stillness. He passed through the grand, ornate halls, lined with statues of saints and martyrs, their stone faces solemn and watchful. For the casual observer, the Vatican was a bastion of light, a fortress of faith unassailable by the forces of darkness. But Gabriel knew better. The darkness had a way of seeping in, of corrupting even the holiest places, and it was his sacred duty to root it out. He entered the confessional, where his presence brought comfort to the penitent souls who sought his guidance. His voice was steady, calm, as he offered absolution and counsel, but his mind remained sharp, alert to any sign of the supernatural. Later, he conducted an exorcism, his voice rising in powerful incantations that drove the unholy spirit from the afflicted, leaving them trembling but freed. In the training hall, he sparred with fellow members of the Order. His movements were swift and precise, having been honed by years of practice. Each strike was measured, each parry a reminder of the battles he'd fought and the ones still to come. There was no room for doubt or hesitation in his life, only duty and the unremitting pursuit of the enemy. As the night wore on, Gabriel returned to his chamber, but sleep did not come easily. The storm outside had calmed, but the storm within him remained. He stared at the ceiling, the flickering candle casting shadows that danced in time with his relentless thoughts. Somewhere, out there in the night, evil lurked, biding its time. And as he finally closed his eyes, he whispered a silent vow to the memory of his family. He would not rest until every last vampire had been hunted down and destroyed, no matter the cost. In the silence of the Vatican, a new storm was brewing, and soon Father Gabriel Valente would find himself at its very center. The morning sun filtered through the high windows of the Vatican, casting rays of light across the marble floors of the apostolic palace. Despite the beauty of the day, an uneasy tension gripped the halls, a sense of dread that lingered like a shadow over the hearts of those who walked within its walls. Father Gabriel Valente made his way through the ornate corridors, his black cassock billowing slightly with each purposeful stride. He'd been summoned by the Pope himself, an unusual and urgent request that brooked no delay. As he approached the grand doors of the papal study, 2 Swiss guards, clad in their traditional uniforms, stepped aside with a solemn nod, allowing him entry. The study was a room of quiet grandeur, lined with ancient books and religious artifacts. The air was thick with the scent of incense. Behind a large, intricately carved desk sat Pope Benedict XVII, his expression grave. The Holy Father, normally a figure of serene authority, appeared burdened by an invisible weight. His eyes, usually warm and full of wisdom, were shadowed with concern as they met Gabriel's. "Father Valente," the Pope greeted. His voice was measured but edged with unease. "Thank you for coming so promptly." Gabriel bowed respectfully. "Your Holiness, how may I serve?" The Pope gestured for him to sit, and Gabriel did so, noting the deep lines of worry etched into the older man's face. The silence stretched for a moment, punctuated only by the distant toll of church bells marking the hour. "Gabriel," the Pope began slowly, choosing his words with care. "What I am about to tell you must remain within the strictest confidence. The sanctity of the Church and the faith of millions depends on it." Gabriel nodded. His expression was serious. "You have my word, Holy Father." The Pope leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Over the past 2 weeks, as I'm sure you have heard, 3 of our most esteemed cardinals and a revered priest have been found dead within the Vatican. Their deaths have been unnatural." Gabriel's eyes narrowed. "In what way?" The Pope hesitated, then reached into a drawer, pulling out a small bundle of parchment. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a series of detailed sketches, drawings of the victims as they'd been found. Gabriel's breath caught as he examined the images. Each body bore the same telltale marks: 2 puncture wounds at the neck, and a ghostly pallor, as if all the blood had been drained from their veins. "Vampires," Gabriel murmured, a mix of disbelief and cold realization washing over him. "Yes," the Pope replied, his voice strained, "or something that mimics their nature. The very suggestion of such creatures within the Vatican walls is inconceivable. This is hallowed ground, a sanctuary protected by centuries of divine presence. Yet these deaths, they cannot be ignored." Gabriel's mind raced. The Vatican was the heart of the Church, a place where evil should have no foothold. And yet here was undeniable evidence of a supernatural threat, one that had somehow managed to infiltrate the most sacred place on earth. "Why have I not been informed of this earlier?" Gabriel asked, his tone respectful but firm. The Pope sighed heavily. "At first, we believed the deaths to be isolated incidents, perhaps the work of a deranged individual. But as the pattern became clear, we knew this was something far darker. The Church cannot afford panic, Gabriel. The very idea of a vampire within the Vatican would shake the foundations of our faith. We need this matter handled swiftly and discreetly." Gabriel nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "You wish for me to investigate?" "Yes," the Pope confirmed. "You are the only one I trust with this task. Your experience with the supernatural, your unwavering faith, it makes you uniquely suited for this mission. We must root out this evil, whatever it may be, before it can spread further." The Pope stood and moved to a nearby cabinet, retrieving a small, ornately carved wooden box. He opened it with reverence, revealing an ancient cross made of dark, weathered wood and inlaid with silver. The cross radiated a subtle, almost imperceptible warmth, as if imbued with some long-forgotten power. "This," the Pope said, handing the cross to Gabriel, "is the Crux Sancti Benedicti. It was blessed by Saint Benedict himself, and it is said to have great power against the forces of darkness. Carry it with you on your mission, and let it be a beacon of light in the shadows you must now walk." Gabriel took the cross, feeling the weight of the centuries-old relic in his hand. It was heavy, not just with physical substance, but with the intense burden of the task ahead. He slipped it into his cassock, near his heart, and rose to his feet. "Where do I begin?" Gabriel asked, his voice steady, though his mind churned with the enormity of what lay ahead. "Start with those closest to the victims," the Pope advised. "The ones who had access to them, who knew their routines. Trust no one, Gabriel. We do not know how far this corruption has spread. And remember, this investigation must remain in the shadows. The world must never know what we are facing." The Pope placed a hand on Gabriel's shoulder, his grip firm despite his years. Gabriel bowed deeply, a gesture of both respect and resolve. "I will not fail you, Holy Father." The Pope placed a hand on Gabriel's shoulder, his grip firm despite his years. "God be with you, my son, and may He grant you the strength to vanquish this evil." With that, Gabriel turned and left the papal study, the ancient cross pressing against his chest, serving as a reminder of the sacred duty he now bore. As he stepped back into the Vatican's endless corridors, the storm outside had subsided, leaving behind a cold, eerie silence. But within these walls a far greater storm was brewing, a storm of blood and shadows that threatened to consume the very soul of the Church. And Father Gabriel Valente was the only one who could stop it. Part 2. The Vatican at night was a place of quiet reverence, but as Father Gabriel Valente descended into its depths, the silence felt oppressive, laden with the weight of untold secrets. Torchlight flickered against the stone walls of the underground passageways, casting long wavering shadows as Gabriel moved deeper into the labyrinth. The sense of something lurking in the darkness grew with each step, the sense that there was a presence just beyond the reach of the light. Gabriel's investigation had begun in the usual places: personal quarters of the victims, the halls they frequented, the offices where they'd worked. But his inquiries were met with resistance, a reluctance among the clergy to speak openly, as if they feared that even acknowledging the deaths could bring further misfortune. Suspicion clouded their eyes. Gabriel could feel their unease, their whispers that carried just beyond earshot. The first real lead came from a young deacon who, after much hesitation, revealed that he'd seen one of the victims, Cardinal Santori, in a part of the Vatican rarely visited, the ancient catacombs beneath St. Peter's Basilica. The cardinal had been there late at night, long after the evening prayers had concluded, in a place where no living soul had reason to tread. The deacon's voice trembled as he recounted the strange encounter, and Gabriel knew that he had to follow this thread no matter where it led. As he ventured into the catacombs, Gabriel felt the temperature drop, the air growing colder and more stifling. The walls were lined with the remains of saints and martyrs, their bones resting in silence, and yet the place felt anything but peaceful. There was an undercurrent of malevolence, as if the dead themselves were disturbed by the presence of something unholy. Gabriel's hand tightened around the hilt of the dagger he carried, its blade inscribed with prayers of protection. He explored the labyrinth for hours, piecing together whatever small clues he came across. Fragments of parchment, symbols carved into the stone, and remnants of rituals that had not been performed in centuries. Each discovery pointed to something ancient, something that had been deliberately hidden away. And as Gabriel uncovered these secrets, a pattern began to emerge, a thread connecting the victims from their knowledge of a forgotten chapter in the church's history. One night, Gabriel found himself in the Vatican archives, a vast repository of the church's most guarded knowledge. By day, the archives were bustling with scholars and clerics, but tonight Gabriel was alone, save for the quiet rustle of parchment and the occasional creak of the ancient shelves. The deeper he delved into the records, the more the pieces fell into place. In a section reserved for forbidden texts, Gabriel discovered a series of manuscripts that chronicled the existence of a vampire known as Lucius. Once a revered cardinal, Lucius had fallen into darkness centuries ago, seduced by the promise of eternal life. He'd risen to power within the church, using his influence to corrupt and destroy, until a secret order, a precursor to the order of Sanctus Sanguis, had risen against him. According to the manuscripts, Lucius had been defeated, his body destroyed and his name erased from history. But Gabriel knew better than to trust the finality of such stories. The evidence he'd uncovered suggested that Lucius was not only still alive, but had somehow found his way back into the heart of the church. Even more disturbing were the hints that Lucius might have had a hand in the founding of the Order of Sanctus Sanguis itself. The thought that this sacred order could have roots in such darkness shook Gabriel to his core, casting a shadow over everything he'd been taught. The manuscripts also hinted at something more insidious, that Lucius had left behind a legacy, a network of followers within the church who had kept his secrets alive through the centuries. These followers, hidden among the clergy, had waited for the right moment to strike, to bring Lucius back to power. And now it seemed that time had come. As Gabriel drew closer to the truth, his nights became restless, plagued by strange visions that blurred the line between dream and reality. In his sleep, he found himself wandering through the Vatican, his steps echoing in the empty halls. The shadows seemed to reach for him, whispering in voices he could not understand, yet that resonated deep within his soul. In these dreams, Gabriel would find himself often standing before a mirror, his reflection distorted, his eyes glowing with a crimson light that was not his own. Lucius's voice would call to him, soft and seductive, offering power, vengeance, and the promise of knowledge that had been denied him all his life. The vampire's words were honeyed, promising to fill the void left by Gabriel's losses, to ease the pain that had haunted him for so long. "Join me, Gabriel," Lucius would whisper in the darkness. "We are not so different, you and I. The church has used you, twisted your pain for its own ends, but I can show you the truth. Together we can reshape this world." Gabriel would wake from these dreams drenched in sweat, his heart pounding, the temptation lingering like a bitter aftertaste. During the day he remained vigilant, focusing on his mission, but the nights grew longer, the lure of Lucius's words stronger. The desire for vengeance, the grief for his lost family, and the doubts that had begun to creep into his mind all conspired to weaken his resolve. The Vatican, so long his sanctuary, now felt like a prison, its walls closing in on him as he struggled to maintain his faith in the face of the darkness that surrounded him. The lines between his duty and his desire for vengeance began to blur, and he found himself questioning whether the path he had chosen was truly his own, or if it had been laid out for him by forces he could not control. As the investigation continued, Gabriel knew he was drawing closer to the heart of the conspiracy, to Lucius himself. But with each step, the darkness grew deeper, and the risk of losing himself to it became all the more real. The final confrontation was approaching, and Gabriel could only hope that his faith would be strong enough to see him through, before it was too late. The weight of the centuries pressed down on Father Gabriel Valente as he descended the final steps into the hidden chamber beneath the Vatican. The air grew colder, more oppressive with each step he took. The flickering torch in his hand cast long dancing shadows against the ancient stone walls that had not seen light in ages. He could feel the presence of something ancient, something malevolent, lurking just beyond the edge of the darkness. Gabriel had pieced together the clues, followed the trail through the catacombs and the forbidden archives, until it had led him here, to a place that should not exist. The chamber was concealed beneath the Vatican's foundations, buried so deep that even those who knew the labyrinthine secrets of the Holy See would have never stumbled upon it by accident. The door to this place had been sealed, hidden behind layers of forgotten history, its existence scrubbed from all records. Yet here it was, undeniable and real, and with it the truth he had been seeking. The chamber itself was vast, an expansive cavern carved out of the bedrock. At its center stood an ornate stone sarcophagus, adorned with symbols that Gabriel recognized from the ancient manuscripts he'd uncovered. Symbols of power, of darkness, of blood. His heart pounded in his chest as he approached, the torchlight illuminating the intricate carvings that depicted scenes of death and resurrection, of a figure who had transcended mortality. Lucius. With trembling hands, Gabriel placed the torch in a nearby sconce, freeing his hands to push open the lid of the sarcophagus. It moved more easily than he'd expected, as though it had been waiting for this moment. The lid slid aside with a low, grinding sound, revealing the interior of the stone coffin. Inside lay a figure draped in rich crimson robes, its hands folded over a silver cross that had tarnished with age. The figure's skin was unnaturally pale, almost translucent, and its eyes were closed as if in a deep, eternal sleep. But there was no mistaking it. This was Lucius, the vampire who'd haunted the church for centuries. Gabriel's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the face of the monster who'd eluded the church's grasp for so long. Centuries had not been kind to Lucius. His body was frail, skeletal, but there was an undeniable power that radiated from him, a dark energy that made the hairs on the back of Gabriel's neck stand on end. As Gabriel reached for the stake he'd brought, a voice echoed through the chamber, low and mocking, yet unmistakably alive. So, the prodigal son returns. Gabriel froze, his hand inches from the stake. The voice did not come from the figure in the sarcophagus, but from all around him, as if the very walls were speaking. Did you really think it would be that easy, Gabriel? The voice continued, dripping with contempt. Did you believe you could simply walk into my domain and destroy me? The figure in the sarcophagus stirred, its eyes slowly opening. They were a deep, unnatural crimson, glowing with an inner fire that sent a chill down Gabriel's spine. The frail body that had seemed so lifeless moments ago now radiated an aura of pure, unholy power. Gabriel's hand shook as he gripped the stake, but before he could strike, Lucius moved with a speed that defied belief. In an instant, the vampire was on his feet, his hand closing around Gabriel's throat with a vice-like grip. The stake clattered to the ground as Gabriel gasped for air, his vision swimming with darkness. Lucius leaned in close, his breath cold against Gabriel's ear. You have no idea what you've stumbled into, do you? He hissed. I've been watching you for so long, guiding you, shaping you. Every step you've taken has been part of my plan. Gabriel struggled against the vampire's grip, but it was futile. Lucius was far stronger than he appeared. his centuries of accumulated power giving him strength beyond mortal understanding. "Why?" Gabriel managed to choke out, his voice hoarse. "Why did you kill my family?" Lucius chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down Gabriel's spine. "Your family. Ah yes, the night you lost everything. It was necessary, you see. A boy like you, full of potential, driven by grief and rage. That's exactly what I needed. You were so eager to serve, so willing to fight against the darkness, and all the while you were playing right into my hands." Gabriel's mind reeled as the realization hit him like a blow to the chest. His entire life, the death of his family, his training, his missions, had been orchestrated by Lucius. The vampire had used his pain, his desire for vengeance, to turn him into the perfect weapon, a weapon that Lucius could manipulate to further his own needs. "You bastard," Gabriel spat, his fury giving him the strength to fight back. He reached for the cross hanging from his neck, the Crux Sancti Benedicti, and pressed it against Lucius's chest. The vampire recoiled with a hiss of pain, releasing his grip on Gabriel's throat. Lucius staggered back, his eyes blazing with hatred. "You think that trinket can save you?" he snarled. "You're nothing without me, Gabriel. Without your pain, your anger, you're just another lost soul." Gabriel staggered to his feet, his chest heaving as he gasped for breath. Grabbed the stake from the ground, his grip tightening around the weapon. "I'm not your puppet, Lucius," he growled. "I am the Sentinel, and I will destroy you." With a cry of defiance, Gabriel lunged at Lucius, driving the stake toward the vampire's heart. But Lucius was ready. He moved with lightning speed, sidestepping the attack and delivering a crushing blow to Gabriel's side. The impact sent Gabriel crashing into the stone wall, pain exploding through his body. Lucius loomed over him, his eyes burning with triumph. "You're a fool, Gabriel. You cannot kill me. I am eternal. Now you will die knowing that you have failed." Before Lucius could deliver the killing blow, a distant sound echoed through the chamber, the ringing of the Vatican bells, their tolling reverberating through the stone walls. The sound seemed to weaken Lucius, if only for a moment, and his grip on Gabriel was loosening as the bells continued to ring. Taking advantage of the distraction, Gabriel summoned the last of his strength and drove the Crux Sancti Benedicti into Lucius's chest. The relic flared with a brilliant light as it made contact with the vampire's flesh, burning him with holy fire. Lucius screamed in agony, his form flickering like a shadow caught in the sun's rays. But before Gabriel could finish him, Lucius wrenched himself free, the force of the holy relic driving him back. He staggered toward the shadows, his body already beginning to heal, his form becoming less solid, more ethereal. "You might have won this battle, Gabriel," Lucius rasped, his voice echoing as he faded into the darkness. "But the war is far from over. I will return, and when I do, you will beg for death." With that, Lucius was gone, his presence vanishing like smoke in the wind, leaving Gabriel alone in the cold, silent chamber. Gabriel collapsed to the ground, his body battered, his faith shattered. The truth of Lucius's words hung heavy in the air. Everything he'd believed in, everything he'd fought for had been a lie. The enemy had been within the church all along, festering, growing stronger. Now Gabriel was the one left to pick up the pieces. As the Vatican bells continued to toll, their sound was hollow and distant, and Gabriel knew this was far from over. Lucius had escaped, but Gabriel would hunt him down no matter the cost, even if it meant confronting the darkest parts of himself, the parts that Lucius had so carefully nurtured. The battle for his soul had only just begun. Part 3. Father Gabriel Valente stood alone in the dim light of his private chamber, the flickering candles casting shadows on the stone walls. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the weight of centuries of prayer. On the table before him lay an array of weapons: silver stakes, vials of holy water, consecrated blades, and the crux sancti benedicti, still glowing faintly from its encounter with Lucius. Each drink had been blessed, imbued with the power of the church, yet they felt insignificant against the darkness he now faced. Gabriel's faith, once unshakable, had been tested to its very limits. The revelation that Lucius had manipulated his life, that the vampire had orchestrated his path from the shadows, gnawed at his very soul. His sense of purpose, his righteousness, everything he'd built his life upon, now seemed like the carefully laid bricks of a false foundation. He'd been nothing more than a pawn in Lucius's game, his anger and pain turned into weapons against the very institution he'd sworn to protect. But even as doubt threatened to consume him, a deeper resolve took root. Gabriel knew he could not allow Lucius to destroy everything. The vampire's plan was clear now. He intended to corrupt the heart of the church by turning its greatest defender, to unravel the sanctity of the Vatican from within. If Lucius succeeded, the darkness would spread, tainting the faith of millions, leaving the world vulnerable to horrors beyond imagination. Gabriel knelt before the small altar in his chamber, clutching the crux sancti benedicti to his chest. He prayed not for strength, for he knew he had little left, but for clarity, for the wisdom to see his path through the lies and deceptions that surrounded him. The words came slowly at first, but then more surely, until his voice was steady, a quiet defiance against the encroaching darkness. As he rose, a sense of calm settled over him. Gabriel knew that the final confrontation was inevitable, and he would face it head-on, armed with the only things that had ever truly mattered: his faith, his resolve, and the knowledge that, even if he fell, he would do so standing against the darkness, not succumbing to it. With his weapons gathered and his mind set, Gabriel made his way to the Grand Cathedral of the Vatican, the very heart of the church, where Lucius had waited, anticipating this moment, relishing the final act of his twisted plan. The Grand Cathedral loomed before Gabriel, its towering spires reaching toward the heavens, a beacon of hope and sanctity for all who sought refuge within its walls. The vast space was bathed in the soft glow of candlelight, the air filled with the scent of incense and the quiet murmur of prayers that seemed to echo from centuries past. This was the holiest place in Christendom, the very seat of the church's power, and yet tonight it felt vulnerable, its sanctity under siege. As Gabriel entered, he could sense the presence of something dark and malevolent. The air was heavy with a palpable tension, the sacred energy of the cathedral tainted by an invisible corruption. Lucius was here, waiting. Gabriel walked down the long nave, the sound of his footsteps echoing through the cavernous space. He could feel Lucius's eyes on him, watching from the shadows, savoring the anticipation of their final encounter. Gabriel's hand tightened around the hilt of the consecrated blade at his side, the other gripping the crux sancti benedicti, its cold metal a reminder of the power of faith. When he reached the center of the cathedral, the shadows shifted, and Lucius emerged from the darkness, his form materializing with an unsettling fluidity. He was dressed in dark, flowing robes, his pale face almost luminescent in the candlelight. His eyes, red and glowing with an unholy light, locked onto Gabriel's with a predatory intensity. "Welcome, Gabriel," Lucius said, his voice smooth and filled with dark amusement. "I've been waiting for you. I knew you would come, just as I knew you would find your way to me. Everything has led to this moment." Gabriel remained silent, his eyes fixed on Lucius as he slowly drew the blade from its sheath. The vampire's gaze flicked to the weapon, and a smile curled on his lips. "Do you really believe that piece of metal can stop me?" Lucius taunted, his voice echoing in the vastness of the cathedral. "This place, this sacred ground, You think it will protect you, but you can feel it, can't you? The sanctity here is fading, Gabriel. I've been feeding on it for centuries, weakening it, turning it into a hollow shell. Lucius extended his arms as if to embrace the very cathedral itself. This place is mine now, Gabriel. The church you swore to defend has already begun to fall. I've corrupted it from the inside, slowly, surely, till nothing remains but a facade. And now it will serve as the stage for your final failure. With a roar of defiance, Gabriel charged at Lucius, the blade gleaming in the candlelight as he swung it toward the vampire's heart. But Lucius was faster, moving with inhuman speed to evade the attack. He countered with a blow that sent Gabriel crashing into the altar, the impact reverberating through the cathedral. Gabriel struggled to his feet, his body battered but his resolve unbroken. He splashed Lucius with holy water, the droplets sizzling as they made contact with the vampire's skin. But Lucius merely laughed, the sound cold and mirthless. Is that all you have, Gabriel? Lucius sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. You're fighting a battle you cannot win. Your weapons, your faith, they are nothing against me. But Gabriel refused to back down. He launched himself at Lucius again, this time pressing the crux sancti benedicti against the vampire's chest. The relic flared with a brilliant light, burning into Lucius's flesh and eliciting a scream of pain from the creature. For a moment it seemed as though the vampire might be defeated, his form flickering as the holy energy seared through him. Yet even as Gabriel pushed forward, his strength beginning to falter, Lucius's eyes blazed with a dark fury. The vampire reached out, his hand closing around Gabriel's wrist with a grip like iron. He forced the cross away, the light dimming as Lucius exerted his power. You cannot stop me, Gabriel, Lucius hissed, his voice a venomous whisper. I am eternal. This church, this faith, it's all an illusion, a means to control, to keep the masses in line. But I have seen the truth. I've seen what lies beyond the veil of lies you cling to. And soon you will see it too. With a sudden, powerful motion, Lucius flung Gabriel across the cathedral, his body slamming into a column with bone-jarring force. The relic clattered to the ground, its light extinguished. Gabriel struggled to rise, his vision swimming, his strength nearly spent. Lucius advanced, his form towering over Gabriel as he lay helpless on the cold stone floor. This is the end, Gabriel. You were never meant to win this fight. You were meant to fall, to become the final sacrifice that seals my victory. As Lucius prepared to deliver the killing blow, the cathedral seemed to shudder, its very walls groaning under the weight of the unholy power that Lucius had unleashed. The candles flickered, and the once holy light that had filled the cathedral began to dim, as if the very essence of the place was being drained away. But in that moment of darkness, Gabriel felt a spark ignite within him, something deeper than the rage, stronger than the despair. It was the memory of his family, the faces of those he'd lost, and the promise he had made to protect the innocent, to stand against the darkness no matter the cost. With a final surge of will, Gabriel reached the relic once more. His hand closed around it, and as he did, he uttered a prayer, not for himself, but for all those who had fallen, for all those who had suffered at the hands of the darkness. Sancte Michael Arcangele, defende nos in proelio. The words came slowly at first, then with increasing strength. The prayer was a call for protection, for divine intervention. And as Gabriel spoke, he felt a warmth spread through his body, a light pushing back against the encroaching darkness. Lucius hesitated, sensing the change, his confidence faltering as the light began to grow, emanating from the relic in Gabriel's hand. The holy energy surged, filling the cathedral with a blinding radiance that banished the shadows, driving them back into the depths from which they had come. No, Lucius roared, recoiling from the light, his form flickering, unstable. "This cannot be." But Gabriel stood firm, his faith restored, his resolve unbreakable. He raised the crux sancti benedicti high, the light pouring from it like a beacon of hope, of salvation. With a final desperate cry, Gabriel brought the relic down upon Lucius, the holy power coursing through the vampire's body, searing him from within. Lucius screamed, a sound of pure agony as the light consumed him, his form disintegrating into ash, his essence banished back to the darkness from which it had come. The light continued to shine, purifying the cathedral. Part 4. A gentle hush settled over the cathedral as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the broken windows, casting a golden hue across the scattered debris. The chaos and destruction bore silent witness to the epic struggle that had unfolded within these sacred walls. Slowly, the sounds of hurried footsteps and anxious voices filled the air as members of the clergy, alerted by the earlier disturbances, rushed into the hall. Pope Benedict XVII entered, flanked by concerned cardinals and Swiss guards. His eyes widened in shock and sorrow as he took in the devastation before him, but his gaze quickly found Gabriel's still form lying near the altar. The Holy Father hurried to his side, kneeling down and gently cradling Gabriel's head in his hands. "Gabriel, my son," the Pope whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "what have you done?" Gabriel's eyes fluttered open, his gaze unfocused but peaceful. A faint smile touched his lips as he looked up at the Pope, recognizing the kindness and concern in the elder man's eyes. "It's over," Gabriel murmured weakly. "Lucius, he is gone. The Vatican is safe." Tears glistened in the Pope's eyes as he nodded, understanding the magnitude of Gabriel's sacrifice. "You have done more than anyone could have asked, my son. You have saved us all." Around them, the clergy began to tend to the damage, but many paused to bow their heads in respect and sorrow, recognizing the heroism and the cost of Gabriel's actions, even if they did not fully grasp what had transpired. Gabriel's breathing grew shallow, each inhale more labored than the last. Yet his expression remained serene, his eyes gazing upward as if seeing something beyond the physical realm. A soft, otherworldly glow seemed to surround him, and a profound stillness filled the space. In that moment, Gabriel was transported beyond the confines of the cathedral. He found himself standing in a sunlit meadow, the air fresh and filled with a sweet scent of wild flowers. A gentle breeze caressed his face, and all the pain and weariness faded away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of joy and peace. Ahead of him, he saw familiar figures emerging from the light. His mother, father, and sister, their faces radiant and eyes filled with love. They walked toward him, their arms open in welcome. Tears of happiness welled up in Gabriel's eyes as he rushed forward, embracing them in a reunion he had longed for his entire life. "Welcome home, Gabriel," his mother whispered, her voice melodious and soothing. "We are so proud of you," his father added, his hand resting warmly on Gabriel's shoulder. His sister laughed, a sound that filled his heart with pure delight. "You were so brave, brother. You brought light to the darkness." Gabriel felt a profound sense of completion, of a journey ended and a purpose fulfilled. He looked back over his shoulder, seeing the world he was leaving behind, but feeling no sadness, only gratitude for the experiences and the chance to make a difference. As the vision began to fade, Gabriel's earthly body released a final, gentle breath. The Pope and those gathered around knew the moment had come, and a solemn silence fell over the cathedral. The Holy Father bowed his head, offering a prayer for Gabriel's soul, his words echoing through the hallowed space and carrying with them the deepest respect and mourning of all present. In the days that followed, the Vatican honored Father Gabriel Valente with a ceremony befitting a true hero. Though the specifics of his final battle remained shrouded in secrecy, the Church acknowledged his unwavering dedication and ultimate sacrifice in the service of faith and humanity. Eulogies spoke of his compassion, his strength, and his profound impact on those around him. A memorial was erected within the cathedral, a simple yet powerful tribute depicting Gabriel standing tall, the crux sancti benedicti held aloft, a symbol of enduring faith and courage in the face of unimaginable darkness. Pilgrims and clergy alike came to say their respects, inspired by the story of a priest who had given everything to protect the sanctity of the Church and the souls it served. Life within the Vatican gradually returned to its routine, the wounds of that fateful night healing with time and devotion. But the legacy of Father Gabriel Valente endured, his story passed down through whispered tales and guarded writings within the order of Sanctus Sanguis. He became a symbol of hope and resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, faith and humanity could prevail. And as the sun continued to rise each day over the ancient spires of the Vatican, its light carried with it the enduring spirit of a man who had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, not through power or vengeance, but through sacrifice, love, and unwavering faith. The Vatican's corridors, usually bustling with activity, were eerily quiet as the first light of dawn crept through the ancient stained-glass windows. In the aftermath of the battle, a heavy stillness had settled over the sacred grounds, as if the very walls were mourning the loss of Father Gabriel Valente. Yet life within the Vatican persisted, and with it the duties of those who served its hallowed halls. A young initiate of the Order of Sanctus Sanguis, Brother Michael, had been assigned the somber task of cleaning Gabriel's former quarters, a small, austere room tucked away in the depths of the Vatican, far from the grandeur of the cathedral. The space was as Gabriel had left it, sparsely furnished, with a bed, a writing desk, and a modest collection of religious texts neatly arranged on a shelf. A single candle flickered in the corner, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. As Michael went about his task, his mind wandered to the stories he'd heard about Gabriel, the sentinel who had saved the Vatican from an ancient evil at the cost of his own life. Gabriel was a legend within the order now, a figure of awe and reverence. Michael couldn't help but feel a mixture of admiration and sorrow as he tidied the room, carefully dusting the relics and artifacts that Gabriel had once held so dear. His hand brushed against the writing desk, and something peculiar caught his eye. A small, almost imperceptible seam in the wood. Curiosity piqued, Michael pressed on it, and to his surprise a hidden compartment slid open with a soft click. Inside, nestled among the layers of dust, was an ancient, weathered book bound in cracked leather. Its cover was adorned with strange symbols that seemed to writhe in the candlelight, and the edges of the pages were darkened, as if stained by time, or something far more sinister. With trembling hands, Michael lifted the book from its hiding place and opened it. The pages were brittle, filled with elegant, looping script that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. As he scanned the words, a chill ran down his spine. The book was a journal, and the entries were written in a language he did not recognize, and yet somehow understood. The name that appeared over and over again throughout the journal was one that filled him with dread. Lucius. Michael's eyes widened as he read further, his heart pounding in his chest. The journal chronicled the vampire's centuries-long infiltration of the Vatican, his manipulation of events and people, all leading to the final confrontation with Gabriel. But it was the last entry that made Michael's blood run cold. Dated just days before the battle, it described a ritual, a dark, unholy rite intended to ensure Lucius's survival in the event of his physical destruction. The words on the page seemed to shift and blur, and as Michael read them aloud in a whisper, a strange sensation washed over him. His vision clouded, and a dull, throbbing pain pulsed at the base of his skull. He clutched the sides of his head, the journal slipping from his grasp and falling to the floor with a thud. The flickering candlelight reflected in his eyes, which suddenly flashed with a sinister, crimson glow. The pain intensified, spreading like wildfire through his veins. Michael gasped, staggering back as memories not his own flooded his mind. memories of darkness, of bloodshed, of an insatiable hunger that had spanned centuries. He saw through Lucius's eyes, felt his cold, malevolent presence seeping into every corner of his soul. "Welcome, my child," a voice whispered in his mind, smooth and seductive. It was Lucius, his essence alive within the journal, waiting for a new host, a vessel through which his dark legacy could continue. Michael stumbled, his back hitting the wall as he struggled against the overpowering force invading his consciousness. He could feel Lucius's influence growing stronger, taking root within him, threatening to consume him entirely. But even as the darkness encroached, a part of Michael, the part that was still himself, fought back, clinging desperately to the light of his faith. For a moment, the battle within him wavered, poised on a knife's edge. The candle in the corner flickered, its flame sputtering as if caught in a gust of wind. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pain receded, leaving Michael standing in the middle of the room, panting and drenched in sweat. But something was different. The silence in the room was now heavy with a sinister undertone, and the air felt thick with unspoken menace. Michael's eyes, once so warm and filled with the light of faith, were now tinged with a faint, unnatural red. He bent down and picked up the journal, cradling it in his hands as though it was a precious relic. The crimson glow in his eyes intensified for a brief moment, then faded to a barely perceptible glimmer. A slow, eerie smile spread across his lips as he carefully placed the journal back in the hidden compartment and sealed it shut. With a final glance around the room, Michael extinguished the candle and left, his footsteps echoing down the dark corridor. The ancient blood-stained book lay in its secret resting place, waiting patiently for the next time it would be found, its dark influence ready to seep into the soul of whoever was foolish enough to open its pages. As Michael disappeared into the shadows, the Vatican's bells began to toll, heralding the dawn of a new day. But within the holy sanctuary, the seeds of a new darkness had been sown, and the true battle against the ancient evil was far from over. The legacy of Lucius had found a new host, and the cycle of light and darkness was destined to continue. The Sentinel Chronicles would not end with Gabriel's sacrifice. Instead, a new chapter was about to begin, one where the line between savior and monster was blurred, where the greatest threat to the church might come from within its own ranks. Well, that is a subgenre of vampirism that I've done several stories on in the past, but I really, really love it. And it's always a very fertile ground for sort of new ideas and everything such as that. I really hope you enjoyed that one. I did. Many thanks to the author. I received that one via email. Like I said, I've been quite disorganized for a while, and the emails have been gathering. So it definitely was worth my while going through them. My apologies again to the author for waiting so long for me to get back in touch, but I hope it was worth it from my reading of that story. And, that's supposedly part 1, so let's hopefully get some more of that. Really, really enjoyed that one. What did you think? Thoughts, feelings, anything else you want to say in the comment section below the video? And as ever, I'll do my best to join in the conversation. Well, that's it from this evening. Back again on Wednesday, hopefully with another longer story like this. So then, my dear friends, very, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.